Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the podcast, it is actually Labor Day here in the US as we're publishing on Monday. So what we thought we'd do is we'd have a conversation, Kelly and I. So Kelly Barner, my co-founder here at Art of Procurement, is joining us really to have a chat about the year so far, what the economy is looking like, some of the observations we've made throughout the year, and what's next as well. So Kelly, it's like, I think it seems to be like once a year we do a mid-year what's going on kind of podcast. And so we thought, well, let's do this for Labor Day. How are you doing?
I am doing great. And it's so funny to think that we only do this maybe once a year because we're having this conversation all the time. We're just not recording it. So I forget, hi, everybody listening in. I forget that you're not always with us, everybody listening, because so many of the times we have these conversations, it's not just about Art of Procurement. It's about all the things we're seeing in the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Now the interesting or the important stuff. What have you been doing for the summer? You've been doing any traveling? You've been staying at home?
Little bit of travel, trip down the Cape,
Yeah.
here in Massachusetts. Probably will come as no huge surprise to anybody. I spent most of my summer working and juggling kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing quite so fun as recording podcasts and things with kids in the house. It's like, what do they say? Don't ever work with children and animals in show business. You've got the animals covered. I've got the kids.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking out my office window here at the dogs staring menacingly at each other, waiting them to create a big noise and start fighting with each other. So if they do, then, or if my volume suddenly drops, you know what happened.
Exactly. Well, and so, another summer screams by. And actually, as we're recording this, it's literally the first day of school in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. So I can officially claim to have made it. I will also admit I made it about 32 seconds before I missed them. So I was expecting it to be like 15 minutes of glee. I didn't come anywhere near what I was expecting.
It's one of those things, isn't it? During the summer, they don't necessarily understand you're working from home, and yes, that means that you're working. And so I did have to invest in some powerful headphones that try to take out a lot of noise to be able to get some work done. But on the other hand, it's we're lucky that we get to do this where we are at home and can do things with them. So it just gets a little bit much during the summer when it's been weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks now of it.
Exactly. Now, you've had some travel this summer.
Yeah, so we didn't do a big trip like we ordinarily do. We had a couple of road trips, which were very interesting in terms of, I guess there's some lessons learned from our road trips in having a plan B and a plan C. And then I just got back literally 2 days ago from about 10 days in England. So just getting back onto the US time zone.
So still adjusting, and I'm sure eating some of the goodies that you brought back with you. That's the best thing about traveling is new restaurants and new foods, but also old restaurants and old foods.
Yeah, a suitcase full of Cadbury's.
What does customs think of that? Does anybody ask any questions about why do you have like a dealer's amount of chocolate in your suitcase?
They do ask, did you bring anything back with you? And my answer is candy. So, that is that covers a lot of different things. But they didn't ask, if I brought, 56 bars of dairy milk or, lots of packets of gluten-free. We were talking before we went on lots and lots and lots of gluten-free stuff that you can't get over here.
Well, at least if you really had to, you could use a few of the chocolate bars to buy them off and just bribe your way through customs.
So what's going on in the world of procurement? So we thought we'd start. We did a little bit of a survey, and we want to thank everybody for who did participate and answer questions. We wanted to learn a little bit more about, what is on your mind as procurement professionals and practitioners this year, and just some really interesting kind of nuggets of information that came out of that survey. One of the things that was really interesting to us as content creators is that content needs you always think, is there too much content out there?
Yeah.
Or are we creating too much? Well, the message we got from the survey was that actually content needs are increasing. We asked that across about 7 different content types. On average, about 65% said that needs are increasing, 33% said staying the same, and only 2% said, hey, I want less content, which was really interesting to me. I think it's probably more, as we saw some of the other results in the survey, was more around, I need more quality content generally, as opposed to I need more. Because I think that's one of the other things that kind of stood out was it is really all about quality. And there's so much content that I think with the explosion of AI as well makes it a lot easier to create content, that it's harder for good content, or you're looking in more places to get that good content.
I will admit to being surprised, although pleasantly surprised by these findings, because I always have sort of that same feeling like, okay, at what point is everybody going to say, enough, please, no more content? We have more content than we can handle. And yet, maybe to your point about quality, a lot of the volume that's being circulated, people might not actually recognize as the content that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting better and better at weeding and sifting through all that.
Yeah, and it makes, it was loud and clear as well around, how can we make content that is more targeted, but in a way that, fits your industry, fits your very specific situation. And so that's certainly something that it's very hard to do at scale. It's also very hard to do without a huge, big team of folks creating content. But, it gets the cogs whirring, if you will, about how can you take content that is not necessarily created for a specific industry, but then create derivatives of that content that take more nuance for individual industries, which means that it's written more for you and is more valuable for you based on your current situation, rather than you having to try and make that leap between something that's generic and something that, okay, how do I apply that to my certain specific circumstance?
And I think too, it's content format.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely by default a reader. My brain goes other places if it's just audio, and sometimes video's not even better because I'm trying to see what books are on the bookshelf behind the person talking, or I'm distracted by the fact that like someone's earrings are moving around the whole time they're talking. So I'm by default a reader, but I know a lot of people, certainly in this community, are big podcast listeners. People love to watch video, and then there's length. Are you a short form person? Do you really like to tuck into like a big meaty white paper? Attempting to serve all of those different sort of interest or community groups, that becomes part of that challenge of scale that you talked about.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we took from this, and something that we're actually building right now, so we're not ready to go live with this yet, but we'll be going live with it shortly, is a redesigned website. And as part of that, what we've been thinking about is how can we really present this information that we have, this library of content that we have, in ways that is more targeted around a specific problem or challenge. So it's easier to kind of say, okay, I need some help in sourcing. So you can go, and everything related to sourcing is in one place. So you can, just get that kind of, okay, I have a challenge in my job right now. How can I go and get some information and some content to help me solve that challenge that I have at the moment? So just to make it a lot more accessible. So that's something that we're definitely, starting now, and that I know we're going to continue to kind of invest in over the next 6 months or so.
Well, it is, as engagement changes, as topics change, as focus changes, and certainly as the whole procurement community matures, you would expect there to be something of a cycle of, changing the way we talk about things, or the expectations around how people have content presented to them. When you first mentioned redoing the website, I'll be totally honest, I thought, oh, not again. Please, not this, anything but this. But the logic behind it makes so much sense. And given that we're sort of a content first community, I think it's important for us to continue to revisit the content that we're creating and then how we're sharing it with everybody.
Yeah, you just thought it was another of my shiny toys. But
No, I knew it was another one
yes,
of your shiny toys. There was no thought about it. First thought was like, oh no, here we go again.
yeah,
Second thought is, I'm going to need more jelly beans to get through this summer.
yeah,
But I'm always glad when we come out on the other side of a project like this, because not only do we all get to share in the bright new shiny toy, but you learn so much in the process. And that was part of what motivated the survey that we ran, wanting to
yeah.
understand needs and interests before we invested in building something out to meet them. It's actually been a really interesting summer from that perspective.
Yeah, obviously I was not busy enough, which is why I came up with all these ideas of, more big projects to work on. But something that you actually um, have really been driving is really refreshing, updating, reinvesting in our YouTube channel, and that's come along a lot in the last couple of months, really as a whole team effort.
Which I'm so excited about. And part of why I'm excited about it is because we have this massive volume of video content, some of it being the very straightforward things like the video component of an interview or a webinar, an AOP Live that we've hosted previously. But we're also routinely creating sort of these bite sized pieces of video content to share on social after we run an event. And a lot of that didn't have a permanent centralized home.
Mhm.
So I'm definitely excited to get to share with everybody, not that much longer, the YouTube channel that's going to be available. But the other thing that's been so exciting, and you mentioned the team effort, I think you and I and Helen tend to be so sort of out there and forward and talking about the content and participating in creating it. But there is a whole ops team behind me, and they have amazing skills. I'm not even allowed to draw smiley faces. My visual skills are so bad. But we have amazing writing capabilities, organizational capabilities, design capabilities. And we brought all of that to bear, not just on ticking off the tasks, but on getting creative and thinking, how should we build this out? What do we want the Art of Procurement video experience to be like? And I am so excited at how the channels come out.
It's you talk about some of those things. It's really interesting when we reflect on our journey from, essentially a couple of content creators. Maybe that
Yep.
kind of talks down the early years of both of our um, endeavors and businesses, but to really something where there's just a lot more behind than just the two of us, which is exciting for us to now create these new things where before we were a little bit constrained from a bandwidth perspective. That's not to say that we're not still constrained on a bandwidth perspective, because I think we always have probably too many ideas.
And you keep starting projects.
And I keep coming up with more ideas. But that just, is how we're evolving and maturing and, starting thinking about organizational charts. And, that's something we've been working on. We have an offsite that's coming, a team offsite that's going to be coming up shortly to really look at, how can we continue to evolve what we're doing and the content that we're working on. So, we're just really happy with how we're taking AOP. And of course, we're always asking for your feedback on, are we really still, making sure that what we're doing is supporting what you need as listeners and members of the community? Because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to, create this organization from which we have the ability to help the profession move forward with all these different things that are going on more than ever before, I think, in terms of what's that going to mean to me and what should I make of all these different things going on, and opportunities and challenges.
Because there's a lot of new opportunities and challenges. Sometimes they look exactly the same, and they're opportunities and challenges
Mhm.
that have hit procurement this year. And so, us figuring out, as much as we talk about content creation, you're really just having conversations in a lot of different formats. And you're not just figuring out how to talk about something, sometimes you're figuring out how you feel about something or what you think about something as you go through those conversations. And you have something like a change in the economy or a new form of risk in the supply chain,
Mhm.
or, oh my gosh, AI, you can't have an event and not talk about AI anymore. Figuring out your own philosophy on where that fits into the journey that's already underway, that's part of the whole content creation process. And it's not easy, but it's definitely have fun to have new things to think about.
Yeah. What would you say? I'm putting you on the spot now, and it's dangerous for me to do so without having an answer myself, because you'll turn the cards on me. But if you think about one change this year or one topic, here we are, the middle. Well, we're beyond the middle of the year. What should procurement folks be thinking about that could impact them in the short term?
So I definitely think economics.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, procurement has always been subject to macroeconomic forces and we feel them indirectly. I mean, certainly if you're in manufacturing and you're only one or two or maybe no steps removed from some commodity or raw material, you feel that a lot more directly. But I think where we are right now, both in terms of economic conditions and also some of the policies like trade policy
Mhm.
that may start to change and shift the strategies that companies have in place, where they produce things, where they source things, how they transport things, all those different legs of the journey. I think, procurement and supply chain, in my explanation, have always been cousins.
Yeah.
But I think starting in 2020, we started getting consciously closer. The tightening had probably been happening, but I feel like, getting hit over the head with 2020 made us sort of wake up and realize, oh my gosh, not only have we gotten much closer in terms of interests and objectives, but we need to be closer still. And I feel like understanding some of the dynamics going on in the supply chain has made us better procurement professionals, but has also expanded the scope of our work and even some of our roles into being more operational and closer to what you might think of as a traditional supply chain position.
Yeah. When you think about the economy, I think that nobody really has the crystal ball to look and say, okay, in 12 months' time, this is where we're going to be. Was it a soft landing? Is it a hard landing? Is there going to be more impact? What's the impact of the interest rate cuts that we're going to start seeing, that the Fed has signaled it at least here in the US, and I know in the UK, interest rate cuts have been coming. But when these things happen, it's always really from a macro perspective, an interesting time for procurement, because from an operating model perspective, procurement is in demand, in times where there's more economic uncertainty for all the obvious reasons around cost and expense management. We're not immune to the impact of those as a team and as a function, and our ability to invest, but that is usually a short-term impact. Like, for example, when there are organizational-wide layoffs, it's hard for procurement to protect themselves from that from a internal political perspective. However, once that is done, the money, at least in my experience, comes more quickly back into procurement than it may do in other areas of the organization. And that may be, it may not be in hiring full-time employees. It might be in hiring contractors. It might be in hiring, service providers and outsourcing providers. But the money comes back into procurement because procurement's seen as being a solution to the problem rather than part of the problem itself. Money comes back into tech. What's going to be interesting, what always happens when there's a slowdown is, can you think, well, when the money comes back in, is the money going to go back into people, or is it going to go back into technology? Or is, what's kind of that balance going to look like? And I think in previous slowdowns, I've thought that money would go into technology, back on the upswing more than it actually has done, and has gone as much to people. I'm not sure what it's going to be like this time around.
And it's going to be interesting to see, because I personally feel like we're at a funny place, even in the AI journey.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the things, this is where I'm so grateful. I mean, somebody asked me just the other day, for instance, with our AOP live conversations, why do we do them live as opposed to making them podcasts?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, the resulting content is very similar, but there's actually like a side channel of information that we get in these events. And certainly part of it is relative registration numbers. Part of it is the level of engagement we get from Q&A or comments and what those questions and comments are about in the event. But we can start to read like passive trends, I feel like, in the procurement community. So we started this year AI is the topic du jour. Everything is going
Yeah.
to be fixed by AI and solved by AI and done by AI. And we're all just going to go to lunch and then come back and the AI will have done everything for us. But the conversation stayed at an altitude where I started to sense a mismatch between what we were able to say with confidence, especially when it came to what have we seen happen and where can we talk about results, and truthfully, the appetite that procurement had for specifics. We can talk all day long about the evolution that we've seen happen in not just procurement technology, but the tech stack and the philosophy around it as
Mhm.
a whole. But I think what all of it has meant is that procurement's pretty sophisticated about looking at new technology, evaluating it, asking fabulous questions to start figuring out very quickly, okay, how much of this is you slapping a sticker on it that says now with AI?
Yeah.
And how much of this is, okay, it has transformed how this product works, or it has transformed what you can do, or how easy it is, or what the experience is like. And we started to sense that, okay, procurement's ready for more. And to be fair and to respect that experience, if given whatever the topic is, we can't go more in depth around the role of AI, then AI probably doesn't belong in that specific conversation.
Mhm.
That there was so much of a desire for, okay, but then how many days faster? Or, okay, but what percentage more spend was addressed? Or how much improved feedback did you get from distributed users about some sort of self guided process? When we were getting those questions, I thought to myself, okay, we've pivoted. We've reached a point sort of in this maturity or acceptance journey with AI. We need to start getting more sophisticated and really pushing for outcomes and leading those conversations with, specific applications and outcomes that have been delivered
Yeah.
versus continuing to engage in sort of the speculative, like, well, someday we could. Nope, procurement was ready for details.
Yeah. Show me how and show me
Yes.
where, so that I can trust it and I can um, envisage it and sell it back to my organization. Um, it's interesting when we have the AI conversation as well. You think about the short-term use cases of AI is really it's more around where it can be used in those um, environments where it's about data. So if I kind
Mhm.
of step back a little bit, one of the big challenges of AI and generative AI is, it's only as good as the information it's using. And so we've always had this data problem. We still have this data problem. So it's not truly going to be as transformational as it can be until we fix the data. Now, generative AI may help us fix that data problem. But until that data problem is fixed, then the use cases are kind of limited more to those where you don't need to rely on, lots of historical data, or, where it's a very kind of confined singular process, if you will. And then you can expand that to one process talking to another process.
Yeah.
That's where you start getting into orchestration. But when you think about, okay, is generative AI going to tell me what my category strategy should be? We're a long way away from that yet because of the data that underpins that decision-making kind of ability.
But it certainly could change the way we start to interact with the data that we have. And it is interesting because we talk about AI like it's one thing,
Yeah.
but there's generative AI that works one way. There's AI you can use sort of in like chatbot form, right? To help you search, to make data more accessible, or to summarize and analyze. And so as much as we think about AI as a monolithic force that's hopefully making our lives easier and opening doors and speeding things up, anytime we're pushing for, okay, but if I use AI, what am I going to be holding in my hand at the end of this process that I wouldn't have had otherwise? It's like, okay, but then we have to get just as specific with our use cases and applications as we are with our expectations about outcomes. And so it becomes, I think, a very beneficial cycle where we have to challenge ourselves to ask better questions in order to get better information about
Mhm.
how it can actually be applied.
And I would say don't be afraid to try it.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's where the true education is going to come from. You can be inspired about new potential uses for AI or even old use cases that you haven't implemented, but you're ultimately going to have to try, and you're probably going to have to make some mistakes. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Obviously keep those as controlled and in as controlled an environment as you possibly can. But I would encourage anybody listening to just go and experiment. Whether it's a pilot program with a provider, whether it's something using your own, within your own organization, the access that you have to AI, obviously that being in a more controlled environment. But that's really how I think you will start to envisage how you can use this to the benefit of your procurement organization.
And keep retrying it, because the rate of development is so incredibly fast that this isn't like you could say, okay, well, I tried it and I didn't feel like it was ready, so in 2 or 3 years, I'll try it again. No, you could give it 3 months or 6 months, and it's probably going to be vastly improved. And so maybe that's the biggest thing that procurement could take away from this. I think we've demonstrated our tech savvy. What we need to do, though, is adjust like the mental refresh cycle. When has it been long enough that it's worth taking another look? It's something that wasn't quite ready for prime time. It's not nearly as long as it would have been in the past.
And then the third area really is what's going to happen in the US presidential election. I think there's a lot of decisions that are all kind of on hold. We're just waiting, pending the outcome of the election and the uncertainty that brings. So while of course we don't have any answers or again even projections, I think that's something that is a front of most people's mind at the moment.
I think it is too. And I think to the conversation we had earlier around economy and policy and those things really starting to impact procurement and the work that they do directly, we're keeping an eye on all of this. I wish we somehow knew. I wish we had a crystal ball. That would be so cool. Although it'd be very hard to keep the secret. I got to be honest about that. But we're already starting to watch, and we're careful. We approach these things from the right, most inclusive, sort of expansive perspective. But we're watching very closely to say, okay, if it's Kamala Harris, if it's Donald Trump, we know now it's not going to be RFK. We didn't know that a week ago. And so looking at these possible avenues, one of my projects that I'm so excited about is that we're going to be doing a special series in mid-October, not getting political, don't anybody worry, but looking at what are the different policies, how different are they really, and where are they similar, so that we can say, sort of looking at the election through a procurement or supply chain lens, what are the detailed things we need to be watching for that would actually start to impact the way we work effective January? And so that work is already underway. It's going to be probably one of the biggest content efforts I've done in a long time. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun trying to speculate and extrapolate what we're hearing from what will actually be realistic policies and policy changes. And so I'm very much hoping to have sort of a community-wide discussion around that once we get to the point that that's out.
Yeah, I'm really interested, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing the outcome and the output of putting that series together. I love the way that you approach the Art of Supply podcasts and kind of bringing that storytelling to this series is going to be really interesting. And then we're going to be publishing that across both Art of Procurement and Art of Supply channels as well. So wherever you are, whichever one of those you are subscribed to, obviously listening today to Art of Procurement, it's likely to be Art of Procurement, but we're going to push that out in both channels because, I think, like I say, the way that you approach these and the way that you present the information that you find and kind of perspectives, it's just great storytelling. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes along.
Yeah, me too. I wish I knew how the series was going to turn out just as much as I wish I knew how the election was going to turn out.
So while you're busy doing that, I think I'm going to be on the road. So we're going to a lot of events over the next, it's really mostly in October. So I will be, and Helen will be at some of these as well. So if you are going to be at any of these events, then do just let me know. And it'd be good to meet up with as many people as possible. So I'm going to be going to a ProcureCon in Direct East, which is here. I get lucky that sometimes here, living in Orlando, that the events come to me. And I tell people it's a blessing and a curse. It's really good because I don't have to travel. I can just drive in the morning, but then they have to keep my attention, because otherwise, I can just drive back home again. So that's always kind of, I want to make sure that whenever I go to events here that, definitely focused on the content in the event, that it's something that keeps me interested. So usually, always have a really good time at the ProcureCon events, and Helen's going to be joining as well at that one. Then both Helen and I will also go to DPW in Amsterdam at the beginning of October. So I'm really excited to do that. Matthias and I have talked for really years when he started the very first event for me joining down at DPW. So I'm actually really looking forward to we're finally able to make that happen this year. Getting on a plane right from there to Las Vegas to SAP Spend Connect. So that's going to be 2 or 3 days in Las Vegas. And then we are actually working on a roadshow that we are creating together with one of our partners, Oro Labs. And that will be through New York, Chicago, and somewhere in Silicon Valley during the last week of October. So I'm going to come home after all that and be ready for a little bit of a sleep, I think.
And just so you're not concerned about your travel plans, I did want to confirm, Phil, I have your full October itinerary, and I called ahead to all the McDonald's in the region, and I made sure they would not only be fully stocked and ready for you, but that they would have plenty of cold Diet Coke on hand, just in case you need a little bit of a pick-me-up in between conferences or sessions.
Yeah, it's always the Diet Coke that gets me. And, when I'm in Vegas and in California, it'll be the In-N-Outs. Will be what keeps me going, I think. But travel's a funny thing. Like, I really enjoy going and travel. Sometimes you're like, okay, I just want to stay home for a while. And so it's actually been a relatively quiet summer. So I've been able to get my hanging out at home for a while without doing a ton of travel. I probably would rather not be doing 3.5 weeks all back to back.
Yeah.
But that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I'm sure that'll be good fun. I'll learn a lot of what's in the hearts and the minds of our community as I go to all those events, and then obviously that will come and inform all of our content that we create once we get home.
I was going to say that's the best thing about it. Just like the survey sort of feeds into the website and the strategy, all of these things that you see and hear, or even questions that are asked that don't currently have answers, all of that comes back and informs our business strategy, content plans. So I'm looking forward to getting sort of an influx of new ideas after you and Helen take to the road in October.
Yeah, I love doing that because it's very easy. The further that you go away from being a practitioner, to go into this mindset of, well, procurement people should do this, or procurement people shouldn't do that. Why aren't we doing that? And it's easy to lose sight of the day-to-day challenges. And that yes, we would love to do some things like that, but hey, we're running around trying to respond and send out 10 RFPs.
That's right.
Week. So it's really it's really helpful to stay grounded from that perspective and realize everything that we kind of talk about has that empathy built into it of realizing, you know what, if it was as easy as sometimes it sounds like, then everybody would be doing it. But there's a lot more nuance, of course, to making some of the changes that we advocate for than just going and doing it.
Because for the record, it's not easy.
Yes.
None of this easy.
No. And we both, had those scars from our practitioner days.
Yep. Every once in a while, it's like people will talk about like, oh, I can tell it's going to rain. Like I feel it in my bones. Those scars are still real enough and raw enough. You can feel at certain times of the year, like, oh, my RFP joint's acting up again. I can tell we're in that season. It's all going on.
Well, let's call it a wrap for today. And, I guess we'll do one of these again this time next year and do another half-year review. But hopefully we don't leave it that long between recordings where we just do a show like this again. But next week, we are running a conversation in partnership with Fine-Tune on facilities management category. So if you have any responsibility for either directly or indirectly facilities management, then I would encourage you, of course, to check that one out.
That's one of my favorite categories. Yep. It was an awesome opportunity for me to go back to my practitioner days and totally geek out with Alex Carlson, just talking about facilities and the services and the challenges, and so much has changed. So that is a great conversation.
All right. Well, with that said, Kelly, as always, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for listening. We will be back again next week with that podcast with Kelly and Alex. If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, an event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.